Mexico's breathtaking beauty and vibrant culture draw millions of tourists every year. But for some, a dream vacation turned into a nightmare. From deadly encounters with wildlife to heartbreaking accidents and sinister crimes, these stories reveal the dark side of paradise. Brace yourself as we uncover 1 hour of most tragic deaths of tourists in Mexico.
On July 7, 2018, 27-year-old Tatiana Mirutenko and her husband James Hoover were on vacation in Mexico City. Only a few days before, the couple had celebrated their first wedding anniversary. They hailed from Chicago but lived in California, where they moved after Tatiana had landed a job as an investor relations analyst at a biopharmaceutical company. They were on the trip of a lifetime with two other couples, aiming to make the most of their trip. The couple fell in love with the city and Mexico's food and culture. But tragedy was about to strike. That day, Tatiana and James visited a taco restaurant called El Califa in Lomas de Chapultepec, one of the most affluent neighborhoods. They were joined by two of their friends. Food was particularly important to Tatiana. She was a big foodie, and food was one of the reasons Mexico City made such an impression on her. During the vacation, she'd often text her parents, telling them they had to visit Mexico City and try the food for themselves. As such, it was no wonder that Tatiana was visiting an upscale restaurant. The group finished their meal, and then it was time to leave. It was simply a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. After all, Tatiana hadn't been the target, but it all happened nonetheless. As the group made their way out of the restaurant, two men rode by on a motorcycle. One of them had a firearm. Their target was a 47-year-old man, a bouncer at a nearby bar. The gunman shot several bullets, aiming for the bouncer, but he only managed to injure the bouncer. Instead, a fatal bullet found its way into Tatiana Mirutenko's body. The 27-year-old collapsed in front of her husband, killed by the stray bullet. Tatiana's death came as a shock to her family. It seemed to them that they were only recently looking at flowers for the woman's wedding, and now they were looking at flowers for her funeral. As of 2024, Mexican police have made no arrests in connection with Tatiana Mirutenko's death. It was July 24, 2022 at Playa del Carmen, a popular beach near Cancun, Mexico. Lina Dilip Kumar, a 38-year-old mother of two from Wembley, northwest London, was on a family vacation with her husband Vishal Maugi and their daughters. The family had planned a relaxing day at the beach, intending to take photos and enjoy the water, but this day would end in tragedy. Around 10:30 a.m., Lina and Vishal walked toward the beach with their daughters. They wanted to capture some family moments. Vishal went into the sea with their daughters, leaving Lina with the camera. After some time, Lina decided to join them in the water. She handed Vishal the camera and their beach bag, asking him to take them back to their hotel room. Vishal agreed, unaware that this simple task would change their lives forever. While Vishal was in the hotel room, the waves at Playa del Carmen grew stronger. The peaceful beach was becoming dangerous. Lina and her daughters began to struggle in the water. By the time Vishal returned to the beach, he saw a crowd gathered near the waves. His heart sank as he realized the crowd was surrounding his eldest daughter, who was struggling to stay afloat. In a state of panic, Vishal rushed to his daughter. Beachgoers had managed to hold on to her, but there was no sign of Lina. Desperate and fearing the worst, Vishal approached a lifeguard and begged for help. The lifeguard, equipped with a jet ski, sped off into the turbulent waters to search for Lina. Minutes felt like hours as Vishal anxiously waited on the shore. He watched the waves, hoping to see his wife safe and sound. But when the lifeguard returned, he carried Lina's lifeless body on the jet ski. The lifeguard immediately attempted to remove the water from her body, trying to revive her. Paramedics were called, and they rushed Lina to a nearby clinic, hoping for a miracle. Half an hour later, a doctor emerged from the clinic with heartbreaking news. Despite their best efforts, Lina had not survived. The cause of death was suffocation due to submersion. Lina's tragic drowning left her family in shock and despair. Vishal's statement, read by Assistant Coroner Dr. Peter Straker at North London Coroner's Court, detailed the events of that fateful day. Family members listening via video link were devastated by the recounting of Lina's final moments. Dr. Straker expressed his condolences, ruling Lina's death as an accident. He hoped that Lina's daughters would find strength despite losing their mother. Lina was the only daughter in a family of 5 brothers. Her loss left a significant void in their lives. Vishal thanked his large family for their constant support, as well as the Mexican and British governments for their assistance during this difficult time. What if Vishal had stayed on the beach instead of going back to the hotel room? Could he have helped Lena and prevented this tragedy? What if there had been more lifeguards on duty that day? Could they have responded faster and saved Lena? The coroner concluded the inquest, emphasizing the accidental nature of Lena's death. Her family is left to cope with their grief, cherishing the memories they have of her. As they navigate life without her, they hold on to the hope that Lena's daughters will grow up strong, carrying their mother's love and memory within them.
In October 2021, Anjali Riot arrived in Tulum, Mexico, looking forward to celebrating her 26th birthday on Friday. Anjali Riot, a 25-year-old California resident, was a vibrant person who loved traveling around the globe. But unbeknownst to Anjali, her visit to Tulum would be her last one, ever. Originally from India, Anjali had made a home for herself in San Jose, California. She was a senior site reliability engineer at LinkedIn with a promising career in tech, previously working at Yahoo for 5 years. Even more, Anjali was an influencer known for her travels, which she frequently shared on social media. More than 40,000 people followed her Instagram account in order to keep up with Anjali's travels and adventures. The young woman had what looked like an active and fulfilling life. Before her trip to Tulum, she had visited Glacier National Park in Montana, completing the challenging Grinnell Glacier Trail hike. Her passion for exploring new places was evident in her detailed and enthusiastic posts, where she often encouraged her followers to embark on similar adventures. Once she arrived in Tulum, Mexico, Anjali spent her days exploring and sharing her experiences on social media. It was the evening of October 20th, 2021, a Wednesday, and Anjali was at the La Malquerida bar, enjoying her evening. But things were about to take a turn for the worse, and there was nothing that Anjali, or anyone else really, could do to prevent it. All of a sudden, several gunmen, who appeared to be chasing a rival drug dealer, opened fire in the bar. Anjali Riot and another woman, 35-year-old Jennifer Hensoldt from Germany, were caught in the middle of the violent altercation. Anjali was shot and killed on the spot. She was pronounced dead at the scene, while Hensoldt succumbed to her injuries at a local hospital. The shooting also left 3 other foreign tourists injured: 2 German men, aged 26 and 25, and a 21-year-old woman from the Netherlands. The assailant's target, a local drug dealer involved in street-level drug sales, sparked the deadly gunfight. Authorities arrested Jose Antonio Lila Perez, 25, who was identified from footage outside the scene in connection with the shooting. The Quintana Roo State Attorney General's office and local authorities have been grappling with rising violence and corruption in popular tourist destinations such as Tulum, Playa del Carmen, and Cancun. The administration of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has invested significantly in Tulum, including plans for an international airport and a Maya train stop. Yet these efforts are now overshadowed by the escalating crime rates. Following the incident, the German Foreign Office issued a travel advisory, urging its citizens in Tulum or Playa del Carmen to remain within secure hotel facilities. Tulum's reputation as a calm, carefree beach town has been severely damaged. The local drug gang, Los Pelones, linked to the Gulf Cartel, has been extorting protection money from bars and nightclubs. Their influence, coupled with the presence of rival groups such as the Jalisco Cartel, has turned once peaceful areas into battlegrounds, threatening the safety of both locals and tourists.
September 30th, 2010, was meant to be a day of joy and adventure for 30-year-old David Hartley and his wife Tiffany, a young couple seeking a moment of escape and leisure. That Thursday, David and his wife were out jet skiing on Falcon Lake, a reservoir on the Texas-Mexico border. The couple had met in high school and were married for 8 years. Despite the fact that there had been some worrying news of cartel-related activities on the lake, David and Tiffany weren't too worried. This wasn't their first time out on the lake. They had been there a month earlier too and hadn't encountered any danger. Besides, what did they have to do with cartels? They only wanted to take some photographs of the ruins of a half-submerged church on the Mexican side of Falcon Lake. As such, the day started out beautifully. David and Tiffany were in love. Theirs was the kind of love story most people wish to have, filled with adventure and a sense of security. But their fate took a cruel twist that day, David and Tiffany were still taking photos of the church when they heard the 3 speedboats approaching them. David and Tiffany were stunned to see that the 3 boats were carrying heavily armed men. It all happened in a flash. The men started shooting indiscriminately at the couple. In an instant, David and Tiffany took off on their Sea-Doos. They had to get away. They had to survive this. But bullets whizzed by, piercing the air. It didn't take long for one of the dozens of bullets to hit David Hartley in the back of his head. The man collapsed in the water. Tiffany reached for him and gripped his life vest with one of her hands while holding the Sea-Doo with the other. As she struggled to haul David's body onto the vehicle, the woman found herself staring down the barrel of a gun. There were 2 men essentially threatening to take her life. Tiffany Hartley looked both of them in the eye. She knew they could end it all right there. They could kill her the way they killed David. She pleaded with the men not to shoot her. The 2 men exchanged a few words in Spanish, then left. Tiffany let go of David's body. She couldn't keep holding him, not if she wanted to escape. She took off. More shots rang out from behind her. Tiffany didn't look back. She survived, managing to escape. She alerted the authorities. Her story caused an uproar, with the media dubbing her the Widow of Pirate Lake. Some accused her of being the mastermind behind David's demise. Others suggested both she and David were involved in drug trafficking, since authorities speculated early on that the couple had stumbled into a drug deal, given the area's reputation as a hub for Mexican drug cartels. Sheriff Sigifredo Gonzalez of Zapata County, Texas, stood firmly by Tiffany's side. He noted that her account aligned with 2 similar incidents earlier that year, events she couldn't have known about. Doubts about Tiffany's account waned significantly after Rolando Armando Flores Villegas, the lead Mexican investigator on the case, was gruesomely murdered. His severed head was delivered in a suitcase to a Mexican military post shortly after David's death, underscoring the danger and lending credibility to Tiffany's story. Sheriff Gonzalez firmly stated that there was no evidence to indicate Tiffany was involved in David's death in any capacity. In 2012, Mexican authorities arrested a leader of the Zetas drug cartel in connection with David Hartley's death. Salvador Alfonso Martinez Escobedo was also linked to the murder of the lead Mexican investigator in the case, Rolando Armando Flores Villegas. Escobedo may have been the one responsible for that area, but not the one responsible for the actual killing. It was December 13, 2019, in Cancun, Mexico. Dean Wright, a 33-year-old from Westerhope, Newcastle, was on vacation with a friend. Dean was known for his height, standing at 6 feet 8 inches, and his fun-loving, generous personality. He loved to chat with people and had a knack for making others laugh. This was his 3rd time visiting Mexico, a place he enjoyed and felt comfortable in. But this trip would tragically be his last. Dean had spent the day by the pool with his friend and some American holidaymakers. The atmosphere was lively and relaxed, typical of a sunny day in Cancun. Dean was in high spirits, enjoying the company and the warm weather. As the day turned into evening, Dean continued to socialize, moving from the pool area to various spots around the resort. That night, Dean interacted with an English hen party, Americans, Canadians, and a Russian. He even shared a cigarette with the Russian outside the hotel's sports bar in the early hours of December 14th. Dean was the life of the party, chatting and laughing with everyone around. It seemed like a typical night in Cancun, filled with new acquaintances and good times. However, the timeline of events between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. is unclear. Dean's family believes he may have been assaulted during this period. What is known is that shortly after this time frame, Dean's body was found on a luggage trolley near the lifts at the 2i-operated Hotel RIU Cancun. Guests at the hotel were horrified to see his 6 foot 8 inch frame flanked by security guards. The news of Dean's death reached his parents, Maria and Paul, back in the UK. They received a devastating phone call informing them that their only son was dead, with no explanation given. Dean's family was left in shock and confusion. They described him as a fun-loving, generous Geordie who loved life and enjoyed chatting with people. He had been on holiday, a time meant for relaxation and enjoyment, but instead, it ended in tragedy. Despite police investigations in both the Northeast and Mexico, the circumstances surrounding Dean's death remain unclear. Nearly a year later, his parents still have not received a death certificate, and they are left with more questions than answers. In a statement, the family expressed their frustration and sorrow, saying they received the devastating phone call informing them that their beloved Dean had died, with no explanation, only that he was dead. They described the situation as very unclear, confusing, and terrible, stating that they cannot properly grieve without knowing the truth about what happened. In their search for answers, Dean's family turned to social media, hoping to track down any witnesses who might shed light on his final hours. They enlisted the help of former senior detective David Swindle and his team at David Swindle Crime Solutions, who support families of those killed abroad. Additionally, they sought assistance from lawyer Shane Smith, a litigation executive at Slater and Gordon, to help navigate the inquest process. Shane Smith emphasized the importance of gathering as much information as possible to present Dean's final movements to the coroner. He stressed that the family is desperate to discover what happened to Dean and cannot do so without the help of people who were there at the time. Smith noted that it has been a long 12 months of questions for Dean's family, and they are eager to provide them with some answers. Dean's family set up an appeal website describing him as a bit of a joker who loved to make people laugh, and a man who lived life to the fullest. Dean had a special bond with his mother, Maria. There was only a day that went by without him being in contact with her, either by phone or text. He loved music and attended many gigs and festivals, including Glastonbury, which he visited with his family. Dean saw himself as a DJ and invested in his decks. Dean's popularity was evident at his final celebration of life, held in January 2020. Nearly 500 friends and family members gathered to honor his memory. Dean had worked as an electrician and inspector, traveling all over the world, from Denmark to New Orleans and, of course, Mexico. His family cherished the 33 precious years they had with him and were determined to find out the truth about his death.
On October 24, 2018, 34-year-old Patrick Braxton Andrew from North Carolina left on what was supposed to be a trip to remember in Mexico, where he planned to visit the Copper Canyon National Park before meeting up with his brother in Mexico City. But Patrick never arrived in Mexico City. The 34-year-old loved Latin America and all it had to offer: the food, the people, the cultural heritage, and especially the language. Patrick had discovered his love for all things Latin America a few years after college, when he went on an 18-month journey that took him to Mexico and the northern parts of South America. That trip, for which he had spent years working hard and earning money, changed his life. Patrick decided to learn Spanish, a subject he had struggled with while he was at school. He found out that he had a knack for the language. When he returned home, he was already fluent, which enabled him to become a Spanish teacher. In 2018, Patrick was also the owner of a tutoring and mentoring business. It was either October 26th or October 27th when Patrick arrived in Urique, a municipality in Mexico's northwestern state of Chihuahua. Despite the fact that Chihuahua is known to be dangerous due to crime and other drug-related activities, Patrick was excited to make the most of his time in the area and spent 2 days exploring it after checking into a local hotel. On October 28, 2018, Patrick spoke with his parents at approximately 2:51 p.m., after which he left his hotel and went on a hike to a spot known as La Playita. The day was beautiful, the country was perfect, and everything was going according to plan. Or so the man thought. Kerry Braxton Andrew was in Mexico City 2 days later, waiting for his brother. They were supposed to meet. Their meeting had been scheduled a long time before. However, Patrick never showed up. To make things worse, the family then realized he hadn't communicated with them in 2 days. This was cause for concern. Patrick's family was truly beginning to worry. When they got in touch with the owner of the hotel where Patrick had been staying, they were shocked to learn that Patrick had not returned from his walk 2 days before. Patrick's family alerted the police. In an attempt to locate Patrick, more than 100 Mexican police officers began scouring the Copper Canyon area in search of the 34-year-old. Drones and an aircraft were used in the search, but they found nothing, not even the tiniest sign of his presence. When authorities discovered a body on November 17th, Patrick's family feared the worst, and they were right. The body was quickly identified as Patrick Braxton Andrew. His body was discovered approximately 1 mile from Las Lajas in Urique and the village of Guapalena. This baffled everyone involved, since a comprehensive search of the area had already been conducted. The fact that the body had been discovered in an area devoid of flora and on a stony surface further made matters more perplexing, because it was covered with pine leaves and reddish dirt. An autopsy and an educated guess were all it took to determine Patrick's fate. After being shot in the head, he was buried somewhere in the mountains, dug up, and dumped off the road, where he was eventually discovered by the police. During the inquiry, the governor of Chihuahua announced that Patrick had been assassinated. Furthermore, according to Chihuahua Attorney General Cesar Peniche Esquivel, Patrick came across members of a Sinaloa cartel drug trafficking cell at some point during his walk in La Playita. It's possible that Jose Noriel Portillo Gil, aka El Chueco, or one of his men assassinated Patrick after mistaking him for an agent of the United States Drug Enforcement Administration. Mexican officials swiftly put an end to rumors that Patrick was the victim of a drug deal gone wrong, characterizing him as an innocent victim who suffered the misfortune of crossing paths with El Chueco.
It was January 2017, and 20-year-old Abby Connor was on vacation with her older brother Austin, her mother Ginny, and her stepfather John. The family of four had left their home in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, and were spending what was supposed to be a blissful holiday at the five-star Iberostar Paraíso del Mar resort in Playa del Carmen, in Mexico. But unbeknownst to Abby and her family, something terrible was about to happen. On that January afternoon, Abby and her older brother, 23-year-old Austin Connor, were swimming in a pool at the resort while their mom and stepdad were getting ready for dinner. The family planned to meet up and go eat together. Abby and Austin had spent the day having fun, drinking the occasional drink. At some point during their swim, the siblings decided to celebrate their vacation with drinks from the swim-up bar. When they went up to the bar, another group of people was already there. As people do on vacation, Abby and Austin struck up a conversation with the others, even though they were strangers. After all, why not? They were young, they were having fun, and they were in Mexico at a five-star resort. What could go wrong? As fate would have it, Abby and Austin were about to find out the answer to this question. The bartender poured out a line of shots. Abby and Austin each took one, as did their new friends. They did the shots and then continued talking for a little while. Then the lights went out. The next thing Austin remembered was the cold shock of consciousness in an ambulance. He had no idea where he was or how he got there. His little sister Abby was also being taken to the hospital. She was completely unconscious. But what happened? The truth only came out a while later. After downing the shots, both Abby and Austin lost their consciousness. Other guests saw them drowning in the pool and alerted hotel staff. Abby was found floating face down at the shallow end of the pool, while Austin kicked and splashed in distress, seemingly slipping in and out of consciousness. They were rushed to the hospital. Meanwhile, their mother and stepfather had no idea the siblings were in danger. They reached the hotel lobby and waited for Abby and Austin to join them for dinner. But as time passed, they grew worried. Where were they? Finally, Ginny and John asked hotel staff to call the siblings' room. What happened next changed the course of their lives forever. A hotel employee told them to wait. The woman went to get the general manager of the resort, who informed them about the accident. When Ginny and John arrived at the hospital, they found out the siblings' blood alcohol level was very high at the time of the incident, 3 times the limit in their home state of Wisconsin. Austin had suffered a concussion and had a golf ball-sized lump on his head, but he was awake. The same couldn't be said about Abby. She had a broken collarbone and remained unconscious after prolonged oxygen deprivation. Ginny and John were desperate to help their daughter, but when doctors told them she had to be transferred to an intensive care unit in Cancun and demanded a $6,371 payment, plus a $10,000 deposit for the Cancun hospital before they'd transfer her, the parents found themselves in a desperate situation. They had to find another solution. The following day, Abby was eventually airlifted to a trauma center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but doctors declared her brain dead on arrival. Since Abby had always expressed a strong desire to be an organ donor, her body was kept on life support until suitable recipients were found. In the days after the tragedy, Abby's family attempted to file a police report into the incident, but their attempts were futile. Mexican police insisted the cause of death was accidental drowning, but the family had a hard time believing this. After he recovered, Austin said he suspected they'd been drugged. But according to a multi-part investigation led by Milwaukee's The Journal Sentinel, something even more foul could be at play in Abby's death. Several people came forward and spoke to the Sentinel about their own experiences of blacking out after drinking small and moderate amounts of alcohol at resorts in Playa del Carmen and Cancun. The report chronicled harrowing accounts of American tourists who were robbed or assaulted after being incapacitated by what appeared to be tainted or poisoned alcohol. Some victims also reported being extorted for medical services. The investigation uncovered widespread claims that tourists who attempted to warn others about their terrifying experiences had their reviews removed from the hotel review site, TripAdvisor. Later in 2017, Mexican authorities raided 31 resorts and seized 10,000 gallons of illicit alcohol from an illegal distillery in Playa del Carmen. In November, Abby's family filed a lawsuit accusing Iberostar Resort of negligence. According to the lawsuit, Iberostar knew that alcoholic beverages being served at the Hotel Iberostar Paraíso del Mar were tainted, substandard, poisonous, unfit for human consumption, and/or otherwise failed to meet bare minimum standards for food and beverage safety. It was May 24, 2022 in Colima, Mexico. Ben Corser, a 37-year-old software engineer from Cornwall, England, had been living in Mexico since January. Ben was known for his pleasant nature and had become part of the local community in Colima. He was living with a Mexican-American family, including his friends Claudio and Alfredo, both skateboarders whom he joined in their activities. Ben's days were filled with joy and exploration, but on this day, his life took a tragic turn. On the evening of May 24th, Ben and Claudio returned from a trip to Guadalajara. Alfredo picked them up in a car to run some errands. They drove along the main boulevard in Colima and stopped at a supermarket on Camino Real Boulevard to buy some groceries. Ben was sitting in the back seat, Claudio in the front passenger seat, and Alfredo behind the wheel. It was supposed to be a routine stop, but it turned into a nightmare. As they sat in the car outside the supermarket, gunfire erupted. All three men were shot dead in an instant. The sudden, brutal attack left no room for escape or understanding. There were no signs of robbery, kidnapping, or any other clear motive. It was an unprovoked attack that left the community in shock, and Ben's family devastated. Ben's parents, Andrew Corser, a former head teacher, and Lorraine Downs, along with his brother Tom, received the heartbreaking news back in Cornwall. They described the situation as Ben being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The lack of explanation or reason behind the killings compounded their grief. The police investigation was ongoing, but the family had received no answers. In the weeks leading up to the attack, there had been a dramatic upsurge in violence in Colima. Nearly 400 people had been killed in the crime wave that had swept through the region since January 25th. However, this violence had not been directed at tourists, making the attack on Ben and his friends all the more senseless. Local reporter Bertha Reynoso noted that Ben was the first foreign national to be killed in this wave of violence. The news of Ben's death spread quickly, and tributes poured in from around the world. Friends and family remembered him as a vibrant, multi-talented individual who lived life to the fullest. Ben held first-class degrees in both fine arts and mathematics. He was an artist, poet, computer programmer, skateboarder, sea swimmer, wild camper, festival goer, actor, yoga lover, photographer, music maker, and dancer. He had a rare breadth of interests and was known for his generosity and joy for life. Ben's family issued a statement expressing their profound grief and loss. They thanked the community of Saint-Just, Ben's large network of friends, and everyone who had offered support during this difficult time. The family also arranged for Ben's body to be returned to the UK for a funeral in Saint-Just, scheduled for midsummer, June 24th. State Prosecutor's Office spokesperson Gustavo Adrian Joya Cervera stated that the office was in contact with the British government to clarify the issue and assist with the repatriation of Ben's body. The British Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office also confirmed that it was providing support to Ben's family and was in contact with local authorities. Despite the ongoing police investigation, no clear motive for the killings had been established. The attack seemed to be a tragic case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The randomness of the violence left Ben's family and friends struggling to comprehend the senselessness of the act.
On February 9, 2024, 44-year-old Nico Honabach was enjoying a getaway at the Mia Beach Club in Tulum, Mexico, a popular destination for tourists. Nico had spent a great day in the company of her two beloved dogs, Skylar and Coco, and was just about to leave when tragedy ensued. leaving behind a world of hurt for Carl Perman, Nico's husband of 15 years. Nico was a Los Angeles native with a significant following on Instagram, where she documented her glamorous life and travels. She was a cheerful person who loved to travel. As such, she split her time between Beverly Hills, California, and Cancun, Mexico. Nico had been feeling increasingly unsafe in Los Angeles due to rising crime and homelessness. She had recently survived a harrowing experience. Once, while out on a walk with her 2 dogs, Nico was chased by a person with a knife. This prompted her to decide to spend more time in Cancun. Her husband, Carl Perman, a former DEA agent with extensive law enforcement experience, agreed with Nico. On that fateful day, Nico had just finished eating and was preparing to pay her bill at the Mia Beach Club restaurant when the unimaginable happened. It was about 6:40 p.m. that Sunday when a man ran into the restaurant, chased by another armed man. The first man was Sean Billery, a 22-year-old Belizean with known cartel affiliations. The second man was another drug dealer. As Billery attempted to flee, his pursuers opened fire. Tourists initially mistook the gunfire for fireworks, but then the gunman shot Billery once in the back. Unable to run anymore, Billery was overtaken by the gunman, who then opened fire several more times. It was then that one of the stray bullets struck and killed Nico. According to several witnesses, staff didn't react. They didn't check on Nico. It was other guests that rushed to her aid, but it was too late. Carl, Nico's husband, was out of town at the time of the incident. He was traveling for work when he received a devastating call from a friend informing him about the shooting. Perman, utilizing his extensive background in law enforcement, immediately took steps to confirm his wife's identity and address the situation with local authorities. However, according to Carl himself, he encountered significant obstacles. Once he arrived in Tulum, Perman faced uncooperative and initially dismissive local authorities. He was desperate. His grief was immense. Still, Carl had to spend hours at the Homicide Investigations Office demanding to see Nico's body to confirm her identity. To top things off, and to add insult to injury, local media reports falsely suggested Nico's involvement in drug-related activities. Carl had to provide substantial evidence, including Nico's passport and marriage certificate, to refute these claims and defend her reputation. Mexican authorities eventually issued an apology. There are no public updates on the investigation. The personal circumstances of Nico's untimely death added to the tragedy. She had fled Los Angeles fearing for her safety, but despite her fears, Nico's tragic fate unfolded far from her troubled hometown, in a place where she had sought refuge.
On August 9, 2020, Lisbeth Flores left her home in Brownsville, Texas on foot and walked across the Veterans International Bridge, thus crossing the U.S.-Mexico border to the city of Matamoros, Mexico. The 23-year-old, who was a mother of 2, called her mother, Maria Rubio, and told her she was visiting her boyfriend in Matamoros and that she would be returning home to Brownsville that night. But the cause of Lisbeth's going to Matamoros was far different. Earlier that Sunday, the young woman had received a message from an acquaintance of hers, a man called Braulio Martinez. According to the message, Lisbeth's boyfriend, who was also the father of her 2 young children, had been kidnapped, and the kidnappers were asking for ransom. The young woman, maybe gripped by terror or overcome by love, decided to leave the safety of her home and save her husband without alerting the authorities or letting her family know about the truth, as she knew it. This proved to be a fatal mistake. Less than 24 hours after Lisbeth called her mother, Maria Rubio, the older woman called the Brownsville Police Department. It was August 10th, and Lisbeth failed to return home the way she'd promised over the phone. Lisbeth was reported missing, and police started looking for her. In the meantime, Lisbeth's sister, Carmen, received a text from Braulio Martinez. The man told her he couldn't find Lisbeth anywhere in Matamoros. At no point, though, did he mention he had told Lisbeth about her boyfriend being kidnapped. Lisbeth's family feared the worst. What if something horrible happened to her? She was so young, and her children were so little. Her baby boy was only 8 months old. Her daughter was 4 years old. They could only wait and hope that the police would find the young woman. Police did find Lisbeth Flores only 1 day after she was reported missing. They found her in a grassy field near a construction site in Matamoros, Mexico. She was shirtless, lying face up in the field. She had a horrible injury to her face. A part of her scalp was missing. And to make things even more horrifying, all of Elizabeth's teeth had been pulled out of her mouth. The young woman was dead, and everything pointed to a very violent death. Investigators agreed the woman had been tortured, suffering at the hands of a very deranged individual. Elizabeth died from a blunt force trauma to her head. A rock covered in blood was discovered near her body, but the culprit had left enough evidence behind. Braulio Martinez was arrested at his home on August 18th, a little over a week after authorities discovered Elizabeth's body. The Tamaulipas State Prosecutor's Office charged the man with the murder of Lisbeth Flores. According to an anonymous law enforcement official, Braulio Martinez fabricated the story of the kidnapping in order to lure Lisbeth across the border, with the motive for the brutal crime being a robbery. It is unclear how Lisbeth knew Braulio Martinez. What we do know, however, is that Martinez is a convicted sex offender. He spent 4 years in a state prison in Huntsville after pleading guilty to 2 counts of sexual assault on a child. He was released in 2010. Lisbeth's family had to set up a GoFundMe page in order to raise money for the young woman's funeral. The Mexican government offered the family assistance in returning Lisbeth, but a local funeral parlor eventually stepped in to help the grieving family. It was November 1st, 2021 in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. Joe Dobson, a 19-year-old British teenager, was spending time with his friends in this seaside resort town in the Quintana Roo region. He had been enjoying his stay in Mexico, exploring the local beaches, shops, and restaurants. However, this day would take a tragic turn that none of his friends could have anticipated. Joe had severe allergies to sesame, eggs, milk, and peanuts. He always carried his EpiPen with him, a vital tool in case of an allergic reaction. His friends, Harriet, Preston, and Ryan, were fully aware of his medical condition and the seriousness of his allergies. The group had spent the day relaxing on the beach and wandering through the local shops. By the evening, they were ready to have dinner at a fusion restaurant they had visited before, confident in the safety of the food there. Joe was particularly careful when it came to ordering food. He had learned enough Spanish to communicate his dietary restrictions clearly. That evening, he ordered a vegetarian burrito and stressed multiple times, both in English and Spanish, that his meal must not contain sesame. The waiter acknowledged his request, and Joe felt reassured that he had done everything possible to ensure his safety. When the food arrived, Joe immediately sensed something was wrong. He inspected his burrito using the flashlight on his phone and felt uneasy about its appearance. Trusting his instincts, he sent the burrito back, insisting again that it should not contain sesame. The waiter took the plate back to the kitchen and returned with a new burrito. Joe examined it again and took a bite, followed by 2 more. Within moments, he knew something was terribly wrong. His throat began to itch and swell, a clear sign that his burrito still contained sesame. Panicking, Joe rushed to the bar staff, explaining in broken English that he needed an ambulance. However, the staff seemed indifferent to his pleas. They suggested he drink a concoction of honey and lemon, a remedy that would do nothing to alleviate his severe allergic reaction. Joe, desperate and struggling to breathe, complied just to keep them quiet. Realizing that he had left his EpiPen at their Airbnb, Joe and his friends decided to rush back to retrieve it. They hailed a taxi, but the driver moved casually, not understanding the urgency of the situation. Every second counted, and this delay was critical. Joe's breathing became more labored, and his friends could see the fear in his eyes. By the time they reached the apartment complex, Joe was barely able to stand. He collapsed near the elevator, gasping for air. Ryan sprinted upstairs to grab the EpiPen, while Harriet tried to comfort Joe, who was now crawling into the elevator. When Ryan returned, they administered the EpiPen, but it was too late. Joe's body had already gone into anaphylactic shock, and the injection was not enough to reverse the severe reaction. They called for help, and a police car eventually took Joe to the local hospital. The doctors did everything they could, but Joe's condition was too critical. He lost consciousness and died that evening. The inquest into Joe's death revealed a series of tragic missteps. Coroner Mark Taylor summarized the events, highlighting that Joe had done everything in his power to prevent the incident. He had communicated his allergies clearly and repeatedly, both in Spanish and English. The restaurant staff, however, had failed to understand the gravity of his situation. Their negligence and lack of basic first aid knowledge contributed significantly to the tragedy. Joe's friends Harriet and Ryan provided detailed accounts of the evening. Harriet recalled how Joe had always celebrated her achievements, no matter how small and how careful he was with his allergies. She described the chilling moment when Joe realized his burrito contained sesame and his desperate attempts to get help from the restaurant staff. Ryan confirmed her story, adding that the staff's casual attitude and the taxi driver's slow response only worsened the situation. Coroner Taylor noted that there was a crucial 10 to 15-minute gap between the onset of Joe's reaction and the administration of the EpiPen. While it's unclear if the outcome would have been different with immediate medical attention, the delay certainly did not help. The coroner's report emphasized that Joe had acted unwittingly in consuming the food containing sesame, and the restaurant's failure to heed his warnings was a significant factor in his death.
On August 11, 2023, 5 childhood friends were returning home after attending a festival. But Roberto Olmeda, Diego Lara, Uriel Galvan, Dante Cedillo, and Jaime Martinez never made it home. Their families desperately looked for answers. But when a terrifying video showing the 5 young men bound and gagged was uploaded to social media, it became obvious that something horrifying happened to them, most likely at the hands of one of Mexico's most ruthless cartels. Roberto Olmeda, 20, Diego Lara, 20, Uriel Galvan, 19, Dante Cedillo, 22, and Jaime Martinez, 21, were friends and college students from Lagos de Moreno. The 5 young men would often spend time together. It was obvious that their bond was strong. Roberto was studying engineering at the university. Diego was a blacksmith, working in his father's shop. Uriel was a passionate cyclist and the youngest of the group. Dante was a professional cyclist who had recently started a business, and Jaime worked as a bricklayer. Each had a promising future ahead, with aspirations to succeed in their respective fields. On August 11th, they attended a festival, unaware that this would mark their last happy moments together. After attending the annual festival celebrating a town's patron saint, the friends decided to head home. One of them texted a family member at around 10:55 p.m., letting them know he was coming home. But then, something happened. They were driving through San Miguel when witnesses reported they were intercepted by 10 armed men. The gunmen forcibly removed them from their vehicle and transported them in a white pickup truck and a van with blacked-out windows. This marked the beginning of their horrifying ordeal. Once kidnapped, the 5 friends were taken to a remote location. There, they were subjected to unimaginable torture. First, the gunmen tied their hands behind their backs and bound their mouths with duct tape. The gunmen then proceeded to record the whole ordeal. One of the young men was forced to beat, stab, and decapitate his friend under the threat of his own death. The friends were tortured and killed. Soon after, they were reported missing. In the meantime, the horrifying video of their last moments was released on social media. The Mexican authorities launched a thorough investigation into the case. The Attorney General's office in Jalisco, along with federal prosecutors, led the inquiry, given the involvement of organized crime. The video shocked the nation, and even more drew international attention to the escalating violence in Jalisco. Authorities later discovered 4 burned human skulls and significant bloodstains at a property in the Orilla del Agua neighborhood, suggesting the site of the brutal killings. Additionally, a burnt-out Volkswagen Jetta containing human remains was found, believed to belong to Diego Lara. According to official reports, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, known for its brutal enforcement methods, was responsible for the abduction. The cartel had reportedly lured the men under the guise of a job offer, a tactic used to recruit new members into their ranks. The 5 friends were allegedly offered positions as security guards through a call center linked to the cartel, which posted fake job offers to trap unsuspecting victims. Once brought to the property in the Orilla del Agua neighborhood, the 5 friends were faced with a choice: become members of the cartel or be killed. When they refused to pledge allegiance to the cartel, the friends were tortured and killed. Governor Enrique Alfaro condemned the heinous act, which he described as a senseless and direct attack against the stability of Mexico. He emphasized the need for a strong governmental response to combat the cartel's influence and protect the citizens of Jalisco. Several experts have highlighted the cartel's strategy of forced recruitment through call centers, particularly targeting young individuals from neighboring states. According to these experts, CJNG has established numerous training and recruitment centers in the region, coercing new recruits into committing violent acts to prove their loyalty.
On June 11, 2024, Jorge Guillen of El Paso, Texas, was on vacation with his wife Lizette Zambrano and other family members. The group was staying at the Sonoran Sea Resort in Puerto Penasco, Mexico, which is located on the strip of land that joins the Baja California Peninsula with the rest of Mexico. At 43 years old, Jorge was an evening student at Western Technical College, studying refrigeration or HVAC. He was only days from graduation, which he was set to attend on Friday, June 14th, but he never made it. What was supposed to be a relaxing vacation with friends and family suddenly turned into a horrifying tragedy. That Tuesday evening on June 11th, Jorge and his wife, 35-year-old Lizette, were spending some time at the resort pool with Lizette's cousin and her boyfriend. They were in the pool for about 20 minutes, but it was getting dark and Jorge wanted to visit the beach too. Jorge and Lizette left the pool and went to the beach. The couple sat and talked on the beach, relishing the view. It was getting darker still. After a while, they decided to return to the resort, back to their friends and family. Upon returning, Jorge and Lizette found their son and her cousin in the resort's hot tub. Deciding to join them, the couple got into the hot tub for a little bit. The bubbles had just turned on. After a while, though, their son and cousin got out of the tub. Jorge and Lizette decided to stay and relax for a while longer. They were completely unaware that danger was lurking. Eventually, Lizette got out of the water and sat on the pool deck. Everything was peaceful, at least for the moment. 10 minutes later, Jorge looked at his wife, letting out an expletive both in wonder and terror. Lizette didn't have to wonder at the reason. She could feel the electric shock too. In an instant, 43-year-old Jorge Guillen keeled over. Despite feeling the continuous stream of electric shocks herself, Lizette sprang forward. She had to help her husband. She had to get him out of the water. But Lizette barely managed to touch her husband's body before the electric shock incapacitated her too. Lizette realized she wasn't able to move anymore. Then she started praying that God would help them both. Then there was only darkness. In the meantime, as Lizette slipped into unconsciousness, the couple's friends and family, as well as other resort guests, noticed something was wrong. They watched in horror as Jorge Guillen sank to the bottom of the hot tub, unmoving. By then, Lizette was unconscious too. People rushed to help the couple. Some started praying while others sprang into action. But each attempt to get them out of the hot tub was rendered useless. The would-be rescuers were also getting shocked. Lizette's uncle managed to get the woman out of the water. She had no pulse. Someone started CPR. In the meantime, people struggled to save Jorge, but the shocks were incredibly strong, and he was at the bottom of the hot tub, making his rescue incredibly difficult. To top things off, it took resort staff some 10 minutes to hit the jacuzzi's emergency shutoff switch. Several relatives wrapped a metal pole in towels and managed to push Jorge toward the edge of the tub. Eventually, they managed to pull Jorge out of the water. He wasn't breathing. Lizette was revived after being shocked. She had suffered burns consistent with electrocution and was in critical condition. She was transported to a hospital in Arizona. Several hours later, as she regained her consciousness, Lizette was able to overhear some nurses talking. When one of them said, her husband didn't make it, Lizette knew the absolute worst had happened to her and her family. After recovering from her injuries, Lizette Zambrano decided to file a lawsuit in El Paso County District Court against Casago LLC, the facilitator of the vacation rental. According to Lizette, she and her husband were electrocuted by faulty wiring that sent an electrical current into the water. Lizette also alleges that a nearby security guard didn't help when he was asked to turn off the power to the hot tub. Lizette is suing the resort for $1 million. She wants someone to take responsibility for her husband's death, and she wants to prevent something like this from happening to somebody else. It was April 16, 2024, in Cancun, Mexico, a bustling city known for its resorts and nightlife. Early that morning at 5 a.m., the tranquility of the City Express Hotel was shattered by a gruesome discovery. A 58-year-old British tourist was found dead in his room, lying in a pool of blood. His wife, a 53-year-old British woman, was found beside him with multiple cuts on her arms. This disturbing scene marked the beginning of a complex and tragic investigation. The man was found with a broken bottle between his legs, and there was blood spread across the room, including on his arms and chest. The initial shock of the scene was compounded by the apparent lack of immediate evidence pointing to what exactly had transpired. The hotel staff quickly alerted the authorities, and detectives rushed to the scene. When emergency services arrived, they found the woman still alive. She was promptly taken to the hospital. Reports indicated that she might have been under the influence of an unknown substance, which could explain her disoriented state. Despite her injuries, the cuts on her arms were not deep, and she was later released from the hospital. Local prosecutors quickly began their investigation. Early reports speculated a crime of passion due to the violent nature of the scene. However, the prosecutors made it clear that they were exploring all possibilities. One line of investigation suggested that the incident could have been an agreement between the couple about taking their own lives together, with only the husband succeeding in ending his life. The hotel became the center of a media frenzy. Mexican local newspapers reported the case as a homicide, casting suspicion on the wife. Photographs of the scene, including the man being stretchered into an ambulance under a blue sheet, circulated widely. Despite the grim nature of the photos, they provided little additional clarity about what had happened in that room. The Attorney General's office in Quintana Roo, which oversees Cancun, made a public statement. They confirmed that an investigation was underway and that both the man and his wife were traveling on British passports. They also mentioned their cooperation with the British consulate to support the families involved. The spokesman for the Attorney General's office stated that after receiving reports of a foreign tourist death in a hotel in the municipality of Benito Juarez, an investigation was launched to clarify the circumstances. The initial lines of inquiry suggest that this tragic incident may be a possible self-murder, involving two individuals who intended to end their lives. As the investigation continued, details about the couple's background began to emerge. They were known to have been traveling alone without any immediate family or friends. This fact complicated the investigation, as there were few first-hand accounts of their behavior or state of mind leading up to the incident. The man's wife, after being released from the hospital, had not been arrested, but her current whereabouts were unknown. This added another layer of mystery and urgency to the case. Authorities were keen on locating her, both for her safety and to gain further insights into what had transpired. The sources close to the investigation revealed that no arrests had been made and the case remained open. They reiterated that the initial findings were not definitive and that they were considering all possible scenarios. This included the possibility of the wife being under the influence of a substance, which might have affected her actions and recollections of the events. Local Mexican newspapers continued to publish various theories, some suggesting a violent argument had led to the husband's death. However, the prosecutors distanced themselves from these speculations, focusing instead on their ongoing investigation. As days passed, the British consulate in Mexico played a significant role in supporting the investigation. They worked closely with the local authorities and assisted the couple's families back in the UK. This international cooperation was crucial in navigating the complexities of the case. Despite the ongoing investigation, many questions remained unanswered. Why would a seemingly normal tourist couple end up in such a tragic situation? What was the nature of their relationship? Were there underlying issues or conflicts that led to this incident? The lack of concrete answers left room for speculation and concern.
On November 4, 2019, several members of the Lee Baron and Langford families, American-Mexican Mormons, were on their way to a wedding. It was supposed to be a day filled with joy. Instead, it became a horrific act of violence in northern Mexico, near the United States border, an act that shocked both nations. By the end of the day, 9 people, 3 women and 6 young children, were dead due to a complicated history and the usual cartel violence plaguing the region. The LeBaron and Langford families are Mormon families who have resided in La Mora, Mexico for over a century. These families initially migrated from the United States in the early 20th century, seeking refuge after the US government outlawed polygamy, which was then part of their faith. Settling in northern Mexico, they established communities like La Mora in Sonora and Colonia LeBaron in Chihuahua, which became home to many dual US-Mexican citizens. Time passed, and religious practices changed, but the families continued to reside in the region. However, over the years, the families faced threats and violence, particularly from drug cartels. In recent years, the LeBaron family in particular has been outspoken against cartel violence, further escalating tensions with criminal groups. It certainly didn't help that the area was a battleground for control over bountiful drug smuggling routes. In November 2019, Los Salazar, an affiliate of the infamous Sinaloa cartel, and La Linea, an offshoot of the Juarez cartel, were actively fighting over the region. Unbeknownst to the LeBaron and Langford families, earlier on November 4th, the very road they were driving on had been the scene of a fierce shootout between Los Salazar and La Linea. As such, tensions were high. It was time to leave for the wedding. Ronita Miller LeBaron and her 4 children set out in the first vehicle, followed by 2 other SUVs driven by Dawna Ray Langford and Christina Marie Langford, each with their children. But as the 3 cars approached the municipality of Bavispe, Sonora, they were ambushed by multiple gunmen. Christina Langford realized they were in grave danger. She decided to get out of the vehicle and signal that they weren't members of the rival cartel. But before doing so, Christina took her baby daughter, Faith, and carefully placed her on the floor of her SUV to protect her. When Christina exited her car, she started waving her arms to signal her innocence, but the gunmen didn't care. They opened fire and killed the woman. The second white Suburban was carrying Dawna Langford and 9 children. Gunfire ripped into the car, killing Dawna and 2 of her sons, 11-year-old Trevor and 3-year-old Rogan. Ronita Miller LeBaron's car was shot up and burst into flames. Ronita was killed, and so were her 4 children, her 6-month-old twins, Titus and Tiana, her 10-year-old daughter, Crystal, and 12-year-old son, Howard. But 8 of the children, some of them merely infants, had survived. In the horrifying aftermath, Dawna's quick-thinking 13-year-old son, Devin, took charge of the situation. He covered his siblings, some of whom were injured, with branches to hide them, then he left to get help. Devin walked 13 miles back to Lamora, but as time passed, Devin's 9-year-old sister grew more concerned. The little girl decided to follow her brother. She too walked for hours to seek help. The official search for the survivors started between 6 and 7 p.m. The children who survived were found at 8:30 p.m., with the exception of the children who went on foot in search of assistance. At 9:45 p.m., the girl who went for help was also found. Relatives from Lamora tried to reach them before that, but were turned back by gunfire. 5 of the children were seriously wounded, and as such, were flown to the United States to receive hospital care. The 3 others who were not injured were returned to their families in Lamora. The aftermath of the massacre saw a robust response from both Mexican and U.S. authorities. Family members visited the scene under the protection of the Mexican army, and funerals were held with attendees from as far as North Dakota. The Mexican government attributed the attack to a case of mistaken identity, believing the family's vehicles were mistaken for those of a rival cartel. However, there is speculation that the family's outspoken stance against cartel violence may have played a role. However, other theories pertain to events that happened prior to the attack. As such, it was alleged that in the months leading up to the massacre, Los Salazar warned residents against buying fuel across state lines in Chihuahua, and new enforcers in the area began exhibiting increasingly aggressive behavior. Even more, the Lamora community, including the LeBaron and Langford families, had reportedly reached a fragile understanding with Los Salazar, one of the warring cartels. According to some sources, La Linea may have targeted the Mormons to send a message to Los Salazar about their presence and influence in the region. Following the massacre, 31 individuals with apparent ties to La Linea and the Juarez cartel were detained by Mexican authorities. However, only 7 of them have been charged with the killings. The supposed mastermind of the massacre, Roberto Gonzalez Montes, allegedly an ex-cop, was arrested on November 25, 2020.